Hello everyone. Today I will feature the Tier 8 Soviet destroyer, the Ognevoi. Now, the matchmaking is okay, not really the most favorable, considering they have a carrier and they have multiple DDs that can outspot me, and they also have a Missouri, which is of course a massive threat, but at least it's not Tier 10. Tier 7 to 9 is, for Tier 8, pretty okay. You're kind of middle tier, which isn't the end of the world. Now, considering my spawn, I'm going straight to A. Usually the best cap to go for if you're a capping DD is the closest cap. In this case, though, I am a bit hesitant to go A on Okinawa, because if too many of your teammates decide to follow you, you tend to automatically lose this match. Because, well, the A cap is so isolated that if your team goes to A, you lose control of the rest of the map, and then you get boxed in at A and you lose the game. So there's always some risks involved, but because of my great spawn, I decided it was worth going for it. Now, I'm very hesitant to push in because Kagero and Loyang can both outspot me, but luckily this carrier decides to send out fighters to scout, which is fantastic because this nullifies the spotting advantage Loyang or Kagero would have over me, since the Ognevoi with the full concealment build, of course, only has 6 kilometers of stealth. And well, the Kagero can reach something like 5.5, so of course being able to 6.1 actually, I'm checking the concealment now, 6.1 concealment. So usually Kagero can outspot you easily, but thanks to this plane, that did not happen. He also opened up fire on me. Now you notice I broke his engine. This is of course why I highly recommend Last Stand, is because if your engine breaks, you can't stop. Your ship glides. It just keeps the momentum up and you keep gliding. So he pops his repair and tries to turn away, and I assumed, I don't know if he spotted my torps or something, but his panic decision brought him right into the island. And he's still returning fire. I guess he tried to angle against me. That was his idea. He angles against me and uses his back guns, and in this way he can fight me. But it doesn't really work. I mean, yes, he'll do some damage to me, but ultimately he's going to die here. It's worth noting how long it takes for me to kill him, though. I mean, I've basically been free firing on this Ognevoi, or on this Kagero this entire time, and it still takes me this incredibly long to kill him. And that's of course because the Ognevoi firepower is pretty damn underwhelming. Honestly, it's terrible. For Tier 8, a lot of people have been misplaying the Ognevoi for a long time. It was recently buffed, which greatly increased the torpedo reload, which is good. Because, well, even in the past, the best way to play this ship was hybrid, sure, but focusing heavily on the torpedoes. And that's still the best way to play it, because the guns are just so underwhelming. The guns themselves are actually okay, but the problem is you only have 4 guns, and the reload is quite long, so the DPM isn't that special. And as you saw how long it took me to kill that guy, they're not very efficient. They're good for taking pot shots with, but you are not some sort of knife fighting DD in any way. In fact, you should play around your torpedoes most of the time. Now, since I have managed to kill this guy, I am able to secure this cap. I was briefly tempted to turn away and go down and defend BC, but I noticed we capped B, and it looks like we're contesting C or even capping it, so there's really no point. Also, I'm spamming some intelligence data, because if you look at behind me, there's a lot of ships that are sailing north of A. And that's of course a terrible idea, because they can very easily, well, they're removing themselves from the battle. First of all, they're putting a lot of landmass between them and the enemies, and in general they can very easily end up being boxed in that corner. So that's part of why I abort my initial plan of pushing back that way. Instead, I push straight forward so I can scout for my team, and hopefully that way they will have the balls to keep pushing and they won't get stuck there hiding behind islands and generally being a waste of time. Now, Izumo is of course a much better target for the torpedoes, but when you torp targets, you always have to consider the angle. And you see, the problem here is he's sailing right away from me, and that's the worst possible angle to torpedo anyone from. If you're sailing away from the torpedoes, especially very slow torpedoes like Ognevoi torps, you got so much time to react. You see them coming behind you, you can easily maneuver your ship, you're already sailing away, you got tons of time to react and to dodge them. In the worst case, you eat 1 on the rudder, but most likely you won't eat any. So rather than use my torps on the Izuma, which I don't really even expect to hit, I am instead going for the Prince Eugen. He is, I think, a much better target. Let's see if we line it up. For some reason the white line doesn't want to show up, but I just launched the usual widespread in the direction the Prince Eugen was sailing. That's because I expect the Prince Eugen to maintain a fairly steady path, because he's shooting at the Nagatan Hipper behind me, and he's just kiting away. So it's unlikely he's going to make any big changes to his maneuver, since no one is really shooting at him. They're all shooting the Izuma. And the reason why you can just throw away your torps at a cruiser in between like that is because this Izuma will eventually have to turn. Look at the minimap, he's sailing towards the border. Either he will stop at the border, or he will turn right, or he will turn left. Regardless, that will give me the opportunity to torp him at some point. I don't want to sail too heavily straight towards him, because I don't want to end up being too isolated or too far away from the action, because it does look like the enemy team is pushing C quite hard, so I want to eventually turn away and help them out there. My torps look pretty good on the Eugen. He sees, I assume he sees them now. He's trying to turn away, but he was giving so much broadside that he's probably going to eat, let's say, 1, 2, probably a third as well. So that was some significant damage to him, and he's pretty crippled. And Izuma, as I mentioned, has now hit the border, and he's going to be struggling. He's going to be losing a lot of speed, first of all, because he's sailing right into the border. And if he decides to just border hump, then that's all the better for me, because it's very easy to land torps on these guys, because they move so slowly, and even if they see their torps coming, they can't really dodge them, because they've lost most of their engine power. So I launch 1 where he is, and 1 if he turns to the right, since those are the expected directions. Also managed to spot the carrier, so I pop my speed boost. You notice, by the way, that I am running speed boost instead of defensive AA, and that's because I consider the AA on the Ognevoi to be so very weak that it's not really worth using the defensive AA, and because the Ognevoi in general plays quite different from the other DDs in this line, in the sense that you can quite easily contest capture points with it. So I actually like having the speed boost, the 3-minute speed boost with the module, to quickly be able to maneuver around the map. And I haven't found carriers to be that much of an issue. If you do find them to be an issue, you can of course slot defensive AA, but it's not really needed. My preemptive torps, of course, catch this Izuma. He probably sees them, but he can't maneuver to dodge at all, well, because he's stuck humping the edge. Note that I'm not shooting the Lexington yet. There's no need for me to shoot him yet. He doesn't know I'm here. I mean, he knows something is spotting him, but he might think it's the plane if he isn't paying attention to the icon. The icon is different depending on if it's plane spotting or normal spotting. But in general, he is accelerating. He's been moving, I think he moved very slowly, and now he's accelerating. And I'm not going to start wasting any shots yet. I might get spotted soon because of the planes, but I take this time to estimate his speed, close the distance. That's something you see very often is DDs kind of, they get impatient and they throw away their advantage too early. I'm not doing it. Here the planes are starting to move towards me now, so I wait with the smoke and then I open fire. Note that I'm trying to with AP first, because I want to see if I could get maybe some citadels on him, because I have a quest on the Russian server to get some citadels, but it looks like I'm only able to get pens / over pens here. The damage isn't bad, but once again DPM on this ship isn't really that great. I switched to HE though because I want to get some fires burning on this guy. I reverse in the smoke at full speed, by the way, because I expect the carrier to try to drop me, which he is doing. And because I'm moving around, he has a very hard time hitting me. Also, he tries to drop me in the smoke, but he has no chance because I'm turning and maneuvering at the same time. Lexington ends up eating 2 torps, which of course forces his repair, since he can't deal with the flooding and the broken engine or broken rudder, whatever. So at this point all I need to do is get that fire going, and there's nothing he can do anymore. Now, I could already leave the smoke, I could just sail and shoot at the same time, but you do see that there's a lot of ships down at sea that are turning around. In fact, the enemy still has a ship lead, so I'm gonna just play it chill and not risk eating some stupid AP volley from one of the battleships or something by leaving the smoke. So I'm just gonna play it chill, sit in the smoke. I got 2 fires, so I don't need to spam HE anymore. I'm just switching back to AP for some straight up DPM on this guy to get him killed faster. With the 2 unrepairable fires, he's gonna die anyways. All I'm doing is speeding it up. At this point he is dead, so I'm leaving the smoke. My last volley kills him, and I'm pushing towards C. Now you note, of course, the battleships that came with me to A, they have all been pretty damn useless this entire game, and that's of course always the fundamental problem with going going to A is that people follow you, and especially battleships follow you, and they don't... go to A isn't necessarily a bad thing if you push through A quickly and aggressively, but most of the time they're never quick and aggressive. They stay there and they hide and they delay and they draw it out, and in general, if there's not someone to actively scout and like push the enemy back the way I've kind of been doing here, they just sit there for very, very long. Dropping some torps towards the Eugen, since it looks like he's turning to the left, and I have AP loaded, hoping I can get close enough to the Pensacola, because once again, at this point you already have Russian AP, meaning you can quite easily citadel cruisers. So I am trying to close the distance with him. My torps, I don't know if I took enough lead. I think I need to land 2 torps to kill him, because the Ognevoi torps aren't really that hard hitting, and that's why I'm very happy that they decreased the reload time, so that the ship in general is much stronger. The buff has been very welcome. I think the Ognevoi needed a buff. It couldn't really compete with the other tier 8 ships or tier 8 DDs, and this buff has helped it a lot, since it's got more, the torpedoes are more of a threat now. Switching to HE because I caused the flooding, so I know he's used his repair, so all I really need is 1 fire on him. The Pensacola also went behind the island, meaning he cannot shoot at me right now, so the only one who can actually shoot back at me is the Eugen. So this is a good opportunity to see if I can maybe finish this kill, either with raw damage or just getting a good fire going. 1.3. And the Grosse finishes him off, sadly, so no kill for me, but that's okay. I'm going very close to this island because I don't want this Pensacola to pop up and while I'm detected. Note that I'm not shooting, I'm making sure I'm not shooting, I'm waiting for my firing debuff to disappear so I get undetected. Which it should do very soon. There we go. And so we see the Pensacola is still hiding there. It looks like he does not have any plans of pushing out. Now this Fried de Grosse is kind of rushing in, which I don't understand at all, considering he's against the Scharnhorst, and Scharnhorst of course has torpedoes, so there's nothing to be gained from rushing them. So at this point I know there's not much I can do. I sent some preemptive torps. These are more, if the Scharnhorst decide to turn hard right, these torps might hit him, but they are also likely to hit the Missouri that's coming behind him. I'm not really worried about hitting this Friedrich because he's already dead. I already know he's dead. I caused some fires on the Scharnhorst and he already repaired them, so while I'm waiting for his repair to tick over, I'm shooting at the Missouri a bit to see if I maybe could get a fire on him as well. Switching back to the Scharnhorst, and we're gonna see if we can maybe burn this guy down. Hitting the broadside, of course, the armor is too thick, so you only get shatters. In general, a lot of shatters. There's the Missouri radar that I kinda expected, but I don't really want to leave my smoke. The smoke is such a good position, so I'm gonna see if I can maybe juke them a bit. So I'm moving forward. I'm in general angle, then I stop. Note the Pensacola volley went wide. The Pensacola was shooting me. Because I stopped and started reversing, his volley went completely wide. And now I'm reversing. In general, just trying to juke them back and forth to make sure they're not focusing too heavily on me. I do eat some damage, but they are too focused with the Nagato right here to actively focus me, and at this point, finally, the radar runs out. I sadly don't even get the Scharnhorst kill. It's taken at the last moment, just like the Prince Eugen. My team really doesn't want me to have any of these kills, but I'm back to working on the Missouri. Now the Missouri, of course, has used his radar, and I'm gonna focus on the Loyang behind him because the Missouri is already burning and there's not really that much I can do, whereas my firepower on the Loyang has a big impact. Note that I'm not gonna aim for the island because this Missouri will either ground or he will turn hard right, so those torps are taking into account either he grounds and he hits them or he turns hard right and he hits them, because those are his only options right now. Meanwhile, I create distance because my smoke has faded. The Missouri is still occupied with my Nagato, and while he's occupied I try to deal with the Loyang, since once again my guns do a lot more to the Loyang than they do to the battleship in itself, and killing the Loyang is a much bigger help, a bigger advantage. I managed to land one of the torps. He turned in, as was one of the possibilities that he could have done, and he eats the torp and gets flooding. Having some trouble finishing this Loyang at this distance once again. The reload and in general the dispersion isn't really that superb on these guns, so it can be quite a chore to finish off these kills even if your aim is on point. That's why I always thought people misplayed this ship, because they played it like a gunboat, and the Ognevoi has never been a gunboat. It's always been a hybrid that primarily focuses on torpedoing. Now I know Missouri has used this damage gun, but so I'm just gonna hammer, basically shoot him as much as I can while creating distance. I'm popping smoke, but I expect him to have his radar up, so you note that I'm not actually slowing down in the smoke, I'm keeping my speed up. I'm dropping it to about half or 3/4, but I'm just waiting for him to pop his radar, and then I'm gonna speed up to full speed again. There's the expected radar, and I'm already back up to full speed. I never had any intention of sitting in that smoke. It was honestly just to bait out the radar, so I could use that against him later on, because I knew it was coming. Some big HE hits, but I'm continually firing. He should be forced at this point to dodge my torpedoes if he sees them, and because he gives so much broadside, I of course switch to AP since it gives me more raw damage. And I get finally behind an island in the cover, and his radar, which I forced him to use, should run out any second, so I'm already slowing down so I can use the cover against him. And in this case I'm actually in cover and undetected, which is great, because now I should be able to shoot him, and maybe switching to HE get a fire that will get him killed. Do secure fire. Wait, he's had damage on again? Goddamn, that cooldown. Reversing behind the island and just focusing him. But it looks like my there's a lot of torps coming in from the other angle, so I think my Tashkent might be killing off someone else. His front guns can't shoot me, so I'm not too worried. Nagata might get some hits on me, but he seems to be focused on something else, and the Tashkent actually finishes off the York. So that game ends quite abruptly. And now we of course get to the hilarious part of playing on Russia. 32,500 XP, rounded at 33k XP and 19k free XP for a 211k damage game, which is of course a nice game for the Ognevoi. But the reason I get this is of course Russia has these missions that if you get, it's repeatable, 5 missions every day, and they give plus 300% XP. So I've been able to grind all the way from the Ognevoi to the Udaloi in 17 games. That's how long it took me to unlock the Udaloi, because Russia has the best missions by far. They have amazing missions for grinding lines, and it's really fun leveling lines on this server, simply because, well, Wargaming really loves that server, and it's obvious. Moving on to base XP 3.3k, which is of course quite good for an Ognevoi. Overall, it was a pretty rewarding game. The only DD I really had to fight was the Kagero, and I mean the Loyang focused shooting on the battleship instead of shooting me, which was of course good for me. He should have focused on torpedoing the battleship and shooting me instead, like the way I did it. So he wouldn't end up getting killed the way he did. And finally, detailed report, a 16, almost 17 minute game. Not too much spotting, potential damage, once again not too much. Potential damage you really don't end up getting too much of, because you shouldn't be playing this ship too much like a gunboat, because once again, even though if we look at my guns, I did 70k gun damage with another 42k fires, like that it looks like a lot, but the guns themselves feel very anemic, and you saw how long it took me to kill that Kagero. Most of the time when you use these guns, you want to be in a smoke and shooting someone who's already burned his repair, or if you have to knife fight other DDs. But in general, this is not like an Udaloi, a Tashkent, a Kiev, a Kaba, where you sail around constantly gunboating. If you attempt to do that in the Ognevoi, you're gonna have a very bad game. And finally, of course, the base XP, the captain XP, which is 40k. I can show you my recommended build. This captain is fairly new, because I basically just took some 10-point captain I got from a mission and slapped it on my Ognevoi and started grinding. I think it's up to like a 14-pointer now, but we'll move on to my recommended build. Right, starting off, we of course have the modules. Now the Ognevoi is a bit weird in the sense that you upgrade the guns first, and then you upgrade the hull. but considering the uses for the range are very limited, I would recommend getting the range last. So upgrade the gun, upgrade the hull, and then upgrade the guns last. Consumable wise, premium smoke and premium damage control, and in this case I run speed boost, but defensive AA works as well, depending on which one you find more comfortable. Consumable wise, main armaments mod 1, AA gun range, because the other two are just so useless for a DD in general, especially since you have such good turret traverse that you don't need the faster turret traverse. If you're not running speed boost, run propulsion mod. The defensive AA thing I think is pretty useless. Faster rudder shift and concealment. I like the rudder shift because it's fairly clumsy otherwise. Captain perks wise, priority number 1 is preventive maintenance, followed by last stand, followed by survivability expert, followed by concealment expert. I'm pretty sure I had like a 12-point captain on, this is on my EU account, since I've already moved on to the Udaloi. I went back to my EU account to check my build, and I think I had AR, so this was the build I ran. If you have additional captain perks, then of course torpedo reload, since this is a very torpedo focused boat, having torpedo reload on top is of course fantastic. And for the final points, I'd probably go something like superintendent for an additional smoke instead of priority target, but that kind of, it's unlikely you'll have a 19-point captain. And in general, the way this line works is really weird, because on the Ognevoi you want concealment expert. The Udaloi on the other hand is a pure gunboat that has garbage concealment, so you don't want to run concealment expert on the Udaloi, you want to run AFT and just basically Kabarov's build. And then on the Grozovoi you want to run concealment build again, because it's so stealthy and it can get 6 km concealment. So this line is really wonky when it comes to optimal captain perks. You kind of have to change the entire time, which is really weird, and I'm not really a fan of that kind of thing. Flank wise, let's go back to the Ognevoi. Oops. Whoa, there we go. Flag wise, I of course recommend detonation flag. I don't bother with it on the Ognevoi since I have so many DDs, I don't really care if I detonate in it. Speed flag, since it's quite a fast ship, you want to make the most out of this. And probably, I would say fire and flooding chance flags are probably your best, just to increase your overall damage. Those are pretty much the most recommended ones. Faster smoke is of course always great as well, but that's pretty much nitpicking. Anyway, that was my recommended Ognevoi build, and I do think the Ognevoi right now is in a very good spot. I think it's quite a strong tier 8 DD. It can't quite match up to ships like the Benson in gun power, but it makes up for it by having a lot of torpedo power right now. The reduction in torpedo cooldown really helped the ship a lot, and it feels a lot more comfortable to play. So props to Wargaming for making this ship a lot more fun.